The rain didn't care that I was 18. It fell the same way it had fallen when I was 6, when Sister Agnes first pulled me through the iron gates of St. Brigid's home for children with a garbage bag full of my dead mother's clothes. 12 years later, the same rain was pushing me back out through those same gates, only this time, nobody was holding my hand. I stood on the cracked pavement outside the orphanage with a duffel bag, $43 in my pocket, and a letter that said my state-sponsored guardianship had expired. That was the phrase. Expired. Like milk. Like a coupon. Like something the world had finished using. Behind me, through the second-floor window, I saw little Mara pressing her palm against the glass. She was 7. I had promised her I'd come back for her someday. I hadn't told her that, someday, was a word adults use when they don't have a real answer. I started walking. I didn't know where. My shoes were soaked by the second block. By the 5th, I was crying, and I hated that I was crying, and I hated that nobody around me noticed, and then I hated that I wanted them to. That night, I slept under a bus stop bench. And somewhere between the hum of passing trucks and the ache in my ribs, I made a quiet promise to the sky: I will build something. Even if I have to start with nothing. I didn't know yet that nothing would cost me exactly $1. The first week outside was the kind of hunger that teaches you things school never did. I learned that shelters fill up by 4 p.m. I learned that if you wash your face in a gas station bathroom, you have maybe 20 minutes before someone knocks. I learned that people don't look at you when you ask for work, they look slightly past you, at a spot on the wall just over your shoulder, like they're afraid your poverty might be contagious. I tried everywhere. The diner on 4th Street said I didn't have a permanent address. The hardware store said I didn't have experience. The car wash said they'd call me, even though I had no phone. I wrote my name on application after application in handwriting that got shakier each time, because my hands were cold and because my stomach was eating itself. I remember standing outside a bakery one evening, watching a woman throw out an entire tray of unsold croissants into a black bin. I waited until she locked the back door. Then I climbed in after them. I ate 3 of them crouched behind the dumpster, and I cried the whole time, because they were still warm. And because 18 years of being told I was special and loved by God had somehow ended with me eating out of a trash bag in an alley behind a bakery. Nights were worse than days. In the dark, your mind becomes a courtroom where you are both the defendant and the judge. I replayed every moment at St. Brigid's, the Christmas I got a sweater 2 sizes too small, the time I was caught reading by flashlight and made to scrub the chapel floor, the way Sister Agnes used to say. God has a plan for every boy, even the quiet ones. If he did, I couldn't see it. All I could see was a rotating door of rejections and a shrinking pile of dollar bills. By the end of the 3rd week, I had $12 left. That's when I saw the ad. It was taped to a telephone pole, curling at the edges from old rain. Yellow paper, black ink, handwritten. The words were so strange I read them twice. Land for sale. $1. SAS. No refunds. Call Mr. Holloway. A phone number underneath. I laughed out loud. A dry, broken sound. $1. For land. It had to be a scam, or a joke, or somebody's idea of cruelty. But I took the paper anyway. I folded it into my pocket. And that night, in the bus station where I'd started sleeping, I pulled it out and stared at it under the flickering fluorescent light until my eyes burned. $1. I had 12. What did I have to lose that I hadn't already lost? Mr. Holloway answered on the 7th ring. His voice sounded like gravel being poured into a tin can. You the boy from the pole, he said. No greeting. Just that. Yes, sir. I saw the ad. About the land. There was a long pause. Then a cough that sounded like it hurt him. You know where Mill Creek Road ends? I can find it. Be there tomorrow. Noon. Bring the dollar. Don't be late. I don't wait for nobody no more. He hung up before I could answer. I spent the rest of my savings on a bus ticket that took me 3 towns east, then walked the last 6 miles on a county road that narrowed until it turned to gravel, then turned to dirt. Then turned to weeds. The trees grew thicker. The sound of traffic disappeared. I passed one mailbox in an hour. At the end of Mill Creek Road, there was a pickup truck so old it looked like it had grown out of the ground. Leaning against it was a man who must have been close to 80, sun-scorched skin, wool cap, and eyes so pale they looked almost silver. You came, he said, like he was surprised. Most of 'em don't. Most of who? He didn't answer. Instead, he started walking into the trees, expecting me to follow. The land was 4 acres. That's what the crumpled deed said. But land was generous. It was a tangle of dead brush, rusted fence posts, a collapsed shed, and soil so gray and dry it crunched under my boots like ash. Somebody had tried to farm it, a long time ago. Somebody had given up. Why $1? I finally asked. Mr. Holloway stopped. He looked at me, and for the first time his face softened, like an old photograph softening at the edges. Because I'm dying, he said plainly. And because this land don't belong to money. It belongs to whoever needs it enough to take it. He led me through the brush to the far corner of the property. The ground sloped down into a small hollow, and at the bottom of the hollow, half hidden beneath a rotting wooden cover, was a spring. I will never forget the first time I saw that water. It was blue. Not the blue of a swimming pool or a summer sky. A deeper, stranger blue, the color of something glowing from underneath, like moonlight trapped in glass. The water was perfectly still. No bubbles. No insects. No reflection of the trees around it. Just that impossible, quiet blue. What is that? I whispered. Been there longer than my grandfather, Holloway said. Longer than this country, probably. Folks around here used to call it the Weeping Eye. Said the land around it was cursed. Said nothing would grow. He turned and looked at me with those silver eyes. But I never believed that. I believe some land is just waiting for the right hands. I reached into my pocket. My fingers found the single dollar bill I had folded into a tight square that morning. I had kissed it, stupidly, like a prayer. I handed it to him. He slipped it into his shirt pocket without looking at it, like it was the most natural transaction in the world. Then he pulled a folded deed from his jacket, signed it, and pressed it into my palm. It's yours now, son. God help you. He drove away before I could ask him anything else. I stood alone in a field I owned, next to a spring I didn't understand, with no tools, no food, no shelter, and no idea what I was supposed to do next. But for the first time in 3 weeks, maybe for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing on somebody else's floor. The first month almost killed me. I built a lean-to out of the collapsed shed's lumber, using rocks as hammers and my hands as measuring tools. It fell down twice. The third time, I sat in the dirt and laughed until I cried, because the wind had stopped and the sky was gold and I realized I was completely, absolutely alone with a problem. And nobody was coming to solve it for me. So I solved it. Badly. But I solved it. I walked the 6 miles into the nearest town twice a week, did odd jobs, unloading trucks, sweeping warehouses, cleaning gutters, and came back with seeds, nails, a shovel, a used tarp, and once, triumphantly, a hen named Patience because she waited 3 whole hours in a cardboard box for me to walk her home. I tried to plant things. Corn. Beans. Tomatoes. Potatoes. Nothing grew. The gray soil was exactly what it looked like, dead. Seeds sat in it and rotted. Seedlings turned yellow and collapsed. The books I'd read in the town library had all said that healthy land is dark, loose, alive. My land was pale, compacted, and silent. I remember the night I hit my lowest point. It had rained for 3 days straight, and my lean-to had leaked through. I was curled on a wet tarp, shivering, holding the last of my seeds in a soaked paper bag, and I thought, Mr. Holloway tricked me. There's no magic here. There's just a dying old man who wanted to hand off his regret. I grabbed the seeds and threw them. Just threw them into the dark, as hard as I could, in the direction of the spring. I heard them scatter into the hollow. I screamed into the rain until my throat was raw. I called God a liar. I called myself a fool. I called my mother, my dead mother, whose face I barely remembered, and asked her why she had left me in a place like this. Nobody answered. I fell asleep crying. And in the morning, when I crawled out of my wet tarp to piss off the edge of the hollow, I saw it. Around the blue spring, in the 3-foot ring of soil immediately bordering the water, something was sprouting. Tiny green shoots. Dozens of them. Exactly where my thrown seeds had landed. Only where my thrown seeds had landed. I walked back 10 feet from the spring and knelt down. The soil there was the same dead gray. I walked back to the water's edge. The soil there was dark. Not just damp, dark. Alive-looking. Soft between my fingers. My whole body started shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was cold or hope or both. I didn't sleep much that week. I studied the ring around the spring. I measured it. I tested it. The living soil extended about 3 feet from the water's edge in every direction, and not an inch further. Whatever was in that spring, minerals, some old mineral the earth had been hoarding, some microbe, something I could not and may never name, it was feeding the ground around it. So I did the only thing that made sense. I started carrying the water. Bucket by bucket, up the slope of the hollow, I poured the blue water onto the dead land. It took me 3 weeks to irrigate a patch the size of my lean-to. My hands blistered. My back ached in a place I didn't know had muscles. But each day, I watched the gray soil slowly darken under the water. Each day, I watched my second round of seeds push tiny green fists out of what used to be ash. And then, I planted more. And more. And more. By the end of that first year, I had a garden the size of a small house. Not a miracle garden. Not a magic garden. A garden I had earned, plant by plant, bucket by bucket, callus by callus. But the real turning point wasn't a harvest. It was a stranger. Her name was Ms. Dallassay. She was a retired botanist who lived 2 counties over. And she had heard, through the sort of small-town whisper network that takes months to travel, about the orphan boy growing food out on Holloway's cursed patch. She drove up one afternoon in a dusty sedan. Walked the perimeter of my little plot, knelt down, rubbed soil between her fingers, and said one word. Impossible. Then she asked if she could test the water. I led her down to the spring. She stared at it for a long time without speaking. She filled 3 small vials, labeled them carefully, and told me she would be back. She came back 2 weeks later with results I didn't fully understand, long Latin words, mineral concentrations, trace elements I had never heard of. But I understood the bottom line: the spring was rich in a specific combination of minerals so rare it shouldn't exist in this region. Combined with certain microorganisms that were, as far as she could tell, nowhere else in the recorded state, the water was essentially a natural fertilizer of extraordinary potency. Son, she said, slowly, do you understand what you're sitting on? I shook my head. You're sitting on something nurseries would line up to pay for. You're sitting on a soil amendment people have been trying to synthesize in labs for 30 years. And here it is, just bubbling out of the ground. She paused. What are you going to do with it? I didn't answer for a long time. Because for the first time since I'd walked out of St. Bridget's, I had a future that didn't fit in a pocket. I thought of the bakery dumpster. I thought of Mara's palm on the window. I thought of Mr. Holloway saying, "This land belongs to whoever needs it enough to take it." I'm going to grow things, I finally said. For people who don't have anything. And then I'm going to grow more. She smiled like she had expected exactly that answer. Then let me help you. The next 3 years changed me in ways I could not have predicted, and some that I did not want. With Ms. Dallasay's help, I started small. We bottled the spring water, carefully, respectfully. Never drawing more than the land replenished in a day, and began selling it as a concentrated soil amendment to nurseries and organic farms in a 100-mile radius. The demand grew fast. Then faster. Within a year, I had 3 employees, a proper wellhouse built around the spring to protect it, a real cabin with a real roof. And a bank account that held more zeros than I had ever seen outside of a textbook. But the money was never the point. The money was the fuel. I drove back to St. Bridget's on the anniversary of the day they kicked me out. I walked through the same iron gates, only this time I was wearing clean clothes and carrying a check. I asked to see Mara. She was 10 by then. Taller. Quieter. She didn't recognize me at first. When she did, she didn't run to me. She just stared, and then she said, very softly, "You came back. I told you I would. I paid for her tuition. And the tuition of every kid in that orphanage who had aged out without a plan. I built a trust that would do it automatically, every year, whether I was alive or not. I didn't tell anyone publicly. I didn't want a plaque. I had spent too many years under plaques that meant nothing. But the growth came with its shadows. A corporation, a large one, the kind with glass towers and lawyers whose ties cost more than my first year of groceries, offered to buy the land. They offered a sum of money that, when I first saw it written on paper, I had to read 3 times to believe. They wanted to industrialize the spring. Pump it. Bottle it. Franchise it. I said no. They came back with more. I said no again. The 3rd time, they sent a man in a suit who sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, in a very calm voice, "Son, everyone has a price. Name yours." I looked at him for a long moment. And I realized I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't even angry. I was sad, because he genuinely believed what he was saying. "Mister," I said, "I was sold out of an orphanage for free. I bought this land for $1. You can't outbid either of those numbers with the kind of math you're using." He left. They stopped calling. But the hardest consequence wasn't the money or the lawyers. It was me. Around the end of the 3rd year, I caught myself being sharp with one of my workers for a mistake that didn't matter. I caught myself checking the numbers before checking on the people. I caught myself, one night, standing by the spring and thinking not about what it had given me, but about how to make it give more. I sat down on the edge of the water and I was ashamed. Because I had spent so long being the boy nobody saw that I had, somewhere along the way, started to see myself as more than the people around me. As if what had grown out of the gray soil was entirely my doing. As if Mr. Holloway hadn't handed me a gift. As if the spring weren't older than my entire bloodline. That night, I made a second promise to the sky. A quieter one. I will not forget that I was once the dumpster boy. I will not become the man in the suit. I didn't find the letter until the 5th year. I was clearing out the old collapsed shed, the one I'd pulled lumber from on my very first week, to build a proper greenhouse. Under a rotted floorboard, wrapped in oilcloth, was a tin box. Inside the tin box was a stack of papers, brittle and yellow. And on top of the stack was a letter in Mr. Holloway's handwriting. It was addressed to the one who takes it. I sat in the dirt and read it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. If you are reading this, then the land has chosen you, and you have chosen it back. I was not the first to sell this place for $1. My father sold it to me for $1, when I was 19 and lost, and his mother sold it to him for the same. The price has never changed. The rule has never changed. The spring is not a business. It is a promise. It was given to my family 4 generations ago by a woman whose name we do not remember, because she asked us not to remember. She told us only this: the water will feed whoever the land wants fed, and it will refuse whoever tries to own it. I have watched 3 men try to sell this land for a fortune. Each of them went broke before the paperwork was done. I have watched 7 people come to the ad in the newspaper and walk away laughing. Most don't call. Of the ones who call, most don't come. Of the ones who come, most leave. You stayed. So now the rule is yours. When your time comes, and you will know when, you will put a piece of paper on a pole, and you will wait. Someone will call. They will be hungry, or broken, or both. They will think the land is a joke. Let them think so. If they come, and if they stay, sell it to them for $1. And give them this letter. We are not owners, son. We are caretakers. The spring has been here longer than our names, and it will be here longer than our graves. Our only job is to pass it, clean and unbought, to the next pair of hands that need it enough. God bless you. And God forgive us if we ever forget. H. I sat in that dirt for a very long time. Because now I understood. The land had never been mine. Not in the way I'd started to let myself believe. It had been lent to me, by a chain of strangers stretching back further than the country I lived in, each of them passing along the same strange dollar, the same strange blue water. The same strange instruction: take care of it, and then let it go. And Mr. Holloway, that old man with silver eyes who had seemed so lonely, so tired, he hadn't been selling me a piece of dirt. He had been handing me his life's work. He had been trusting a homeless teenager he'd never met with a 4-generation promise. I thought about the corporation. I thought about the suit. I thought about the night I had caught myself being sharp with a worker. I thought about how close I had come to failing the test I hadn't even known I was taking. I'm 31 now. The spring is still blue. The water still flows, exactly as much as it always has, never more, never less. The land still chooses who it feeds. Mara is in her 2nd year of medical school. She calls me every Sunday. She doesn't know about the letter. I'll give it to her someday, if she wants it. Or maybe I won't. The land will decide. Last week, I taped a yellow paper to a telephone pole on the far side of town. Land for sale. $1. SAS. No refunds. I haven't received a call yet. I might not for months. I might not for years. But I'll wait. Because somewhere out there is a kid sleeping under a bus stop bench, counting the bills in their pocket, wondering if the world has any room left for them. And when they call, I'll answer the phone the way Mr. Holloway answered mine, with a voice like gravel, and a question that isn't really a question: you the one from the pole? Because here is the thing nobody told me, the thing I had to learn with blistered hands and a wet tarp and a throat raw from screaming at the rain: the world doesn't owe you a future. But sometimes, rarely, quietly, and only if you're desperate enough to believe in $1, the world hands you a door. The door doesn't open into wealth. It opens into work. And the work, if you do it honestly, will grow something in you that the orphanage could never take, and the corporation could never buy, and the rain could never wash away. I was kicked out with a garbage bag. I came home with a spring. And someday, I'll give it away for $1, to someone who needs it more than I do. So let me ask you this, before you close this story and go back to your life: if the world handed you a piece of ground that looked like nothing, no promise, no proof. No applause. Would you have the patience to carry the water, bucket by bucket, long enough to see what it was always going to grow? Or would you walk away, laughing, like most of them did?